morning, thanks for joining me. Don't know if you remember, earlier in the year I started an alphabet series of subjects that I just talked about. I'll put the playlist up here. It's not there, is it? It's there, I think. Wherever. I'll put a link to the playlist so you can watch the others if you haven't seen them and you would like to see them. But it was just random subjects starting with A, and we've now got to E. And I thought, as William has recently gone to university, and as I've been sort of toying with the idea of making a video generally around that whole subject, I would make a video generally around that whole subject. Amazing. Now, it's 30 plus years since William's dad and myself went to university, and safe to say the process has changed somewhat since then. Not completely, but quite a lot. Things do move on, don't they? In our day, there were no tuition fees. You got a grant to pay for your accommodation and what have you. Times have changed a lot. So yeah, I thought, and a lot of people, of course, won't have been to university and their kids are applying to university. So I thought it would be interesting to talk through some of the practicalities. And I thought I'd start with going through sort of the application process and how it all works, and then talk a little bit about student finance, boring but relevant, and then perhaps the actual practical going to uni and what you need to take and all that sort of thing. So that's sort of what I plan to do, more so than the emotional empty nest type side of it. I did make a video talking about changes in my life where I touched upon the whole empty nest thing, which I will link below if I can find it. That wasn't too long ago, so I should be able to. Anyway, I digress. Let me grab my coffee and my notes. And the whole university thing is obviously the biggest decision probably that your child will have made to date. You know, what they want to study, where they want to go and study it. It's a big major life decision for them, and as soon as they go into year 2 of their A-levels, so the second year of sixth form, year 13, 12, 13 I think, still can't get the school years right, upper 6 to me. As soon as they go into that second year of A-levels, they start thinking about uni. So really, during that summer holiday, they need to have thought about it a little bit. So they get the opportunity to go to open days at university. Sometimes the school will organise them at open days, and Will went on and organised one by the school to Cardiff University, which I think just gives them a flip. It doesn't have to necessarily be somewhere they want to go, but I would really recommend that in terms of just going to a university, seeing what it's all about, just getting a flavour. They show them around the accommodation and all that sort of thing. So it's worth just going and getting an idea if you really are sort of a university virgin, in terms of you haven't got any relations or older brothers and sisters who have been, so you haven't got any idea. I think that was really useful. And Will's only experience of university prior to the application process was several years ago. He was selected to go on a gifted and talented chemistry camp thing down at Brighton at University of Sussex. So he had actually experience being on a campus university at that point, and spent a few days in student accommodation, which I think was really useful as well. So if they ever get the opportunity to do something like that, I think it is really a good thing to do. Anyway, the application process is such that unless you're going to Oxford or Cambridge, or applying to Oxford or Cambridge, or applying for medicine, dentistry, or veterinary science, that thing, making animals better. Unless you're applying for one of those, your application deadline is early January. So the first thing you need to decide is what you want to study. Most people have some sort of an idea of that from which A-levels they've done, you know, what their A-levels sort of funnel into, and where you want to study it. And William originally decided that he'd quite like to apply to Durham. Now, we live in Devon, for anybody who doesn't know me, and the actual practicalities of studying in Durham in terms of finance, travel time, just all that sort of thing is quite relevant, you know. So I did try to steer him away from that a little bit. I think obviously it's lovely for them to leave home and to be away, but they do need some help and guidance in terms of what would be a reasonable distance from home, bearing in mind you're probably going to have to take them and all their stuff sometimes every single term, because they have to clear out their accommodation at the end of term as well. So yeah, they need to start thinking about practicalities of where to go and what to study. The application process is all done online these days, and a very important part of that is their personal statement. A lot of the I think the actual application deadline this year was the 15th of January, and a lot of the schools put an earlier deadline on it, because when the student presses apply on their UCAS application, it actually goes to the school, if they're applying through a school obviously, or if they're doing it off their own back, it won't do. And then at that point the school adds their things on with predicted grades and all so on. There's obviously an absolute wealth of information on the internet about every single aspect you can want. I would recommend the UCAS guide for parents. I will link that in the description box below. That's really interesting and helpful and quite accessible as well. There's a lot of it. William came over with this blooming great brochure. Just, oh God, have I really got to read that? It was really thick. But on the website it's quite sort of very accessible, that's what I'm trying to say. So anyway, their personal statement, which is why you should pick me basically, selling yourself to the university, is a really important thing, and there's a lot of guidance online how to do that. Will got loads of guidance from his school, which I think he found really helpful. What to say, what not to say. Don't use the word passionate, apparently. Very overused. So you have to get your application in. You can apply to a maximum of 5 I don't know why I'm holding a hand up like you can't count to 5. 5 universities at once, so 5 applications. It's probably a good idea to spread your applications over a range of results, shall we say, and you will, after you've applied, which is the 15th of January, you will start to receive offers back from the universities you've applied to. Now, some of them you will get an outright decline, maybe, well, you might not. Some of them you can get a conditional offer, which is generally conditional upon your A-level results, or an unconditional offer, which is, yes, you can come, we don't care about your results, we want you. Bear in mind that isn't always as good as it sounds, because you might have applied to a not brilliant course that doesn't get a lot of applicants and they want your money basically. As awful as it sounds these days, that's the way it is. So an unconditional offer isn't always the best thing ever. You then have to, at that point, you can choose a firm choice and what they call an insurance choice out of your offers. Oh, if you get a decline, you can apply to more if you so decide through something called extra. So you can have a maximum of 5 applications. Even if you get a decline, you can apply to more, so you get 5 offers effectively. Eventually, if you want to do that. William didn't want to do that. He got 1 decline, I think, and didn't bother to apply to anything else. So he had 4 applications. He got offers from all of his, but then he had to narrow down what was going to be his first choice and what was going to be his insurance choice. It is good to, at this point, be realistic about what your results are going to be, and if you make your firm choice something that is sort of punching quite high in terms of your likely results for A-levels, maybe choose something for your insurance choice that has a lower entry requirement, if that makes sense. So you have to make your firm and insurance choices by around the 1st of May generally. All these dates are a little bit flexible. I'm just giving rough time scales. At that point, you then get on with doing your A-levels. Sorry, I need a sip of coffee. I knew this was going to be lengthy and rambling. And then from the 1st of May, you've done all your applications, you've made your choices. You can also, at that point, for your firm choice, apply for accommodation. Will's first choice was Bath, which he's gone to. And he went on an open day to Bath, to the course that he was interested in, which was chemistry. He went on the train. I thought it would be a good idea for him to go by himself so he could judge, because he would be going, if he was going there, he would be needing to get from the train station to the university and sort of judge the distances, get the feel of the place for himself. And I think that was a really good idea that he went by himself. He enjoyed it, he found it useful, he was able to see all the different accommodation on offer. Bath is a campus university, meaning that everything is pretty much all on one site. A lot of city universities are not campus universities, so it's possible that your accommodation can be on one side of the city, even if you're in student proper, university owned accommodation, and your lectures and tutorials can be on the other side of the city. I was very keen for William to go to a campus university. I went to a campus university, Ashley didn't. And I liked the idea of everything being quite accessible on one site. He's not particularly worldly wise and well-travelled. Well-travelled in terms of being on holiday to a lot of places, but not, we live in rural Devon, fairly rural Devon. He's not used to big cities, so I was very keen that he would go to a campus university. It felt like a good fit for him. So, sorry, that was a complete aside. Where was I? He'd been to he'd seen the accommodation at Bath, so he'd chosen the one that he really liked, the most expensive one. Poor mum and dad. And he was able to apply. They had to choose several different accommodation options in order of preference on their application at this point. I don't think, and I could be wrong about this, but I don't think you can apply for accommodation at your insurance choice. You can only apply at your first choice. So you then go away and do your A-levels at this point and study hard, take your exams and forget about everything until mid-August. It was the 15th of August, I think, this year it was. So on the 15th of August, very early in the morning, well, not that early actually, I think it was about 8 o'clock, you can log on to the UCAS website, and this is quite odd because you haven't at this point got your results. Will had to go into school to get his results, and that was available from 9 o'clock, I think it was. At 8 o'clock, you can log on to the UCAS website and it will tell you whether or not you've got into your first choice of university. So Will found out that he had got into his first choice of university at 8 o'clock before he had his results, which gives you an assumption as to what your results would have been. And then we went and got his results. He got 4 Bs at A-level, which we're very proud of him for. He wasn't that pleased because he really was hoping for an A in maths, but he didn't quite get that. But it didn't matter because he got the place on the course he wanted at Bath. So at that point, if you haven't got into your first choice or your insurance choice, there is something called clearing, and clearing opens the day, in fact it opens beforehand, it opens on the 5th of July, so you can see in clearing, which is basically it shows you all the courses that are available in the whole country, so that still have places available, so you can go to clearing and get onto a different course elsewhere if your results weren't as good as they thought they were. Alternatively, if as you thought they were going to be, alternatively, if your results are better than you thought, you can go through something called adjustment, which is sort of almost the opposite of clearing. That didn't matter to us because William didn't do better. I'm guessing not that many people do, but I'm guessing it's sort of the almost opposite of clearing, or similar in that it tells you availability or whatever. Anyway, yeah. So at that point, Will was into his university that he wanted to be in, and it was all sort of full steam ahead. Term starts mid-September, so it was 23rd of September, I think we took Will up to university. And then Will heard, I think it was the beginning of September, he heard which accommodation he got into. He did get into his first choice, so that was good. and then he got further information by email. It was all very, very efficient, I have to say. The arrival procedures came with a car park pass, and when we got there, although there's thousands and thousands of people there, it was all very well organised, and they had big rolling cages for you to put all your stuff into and take it up in the lift to your flat, and yeah, it was all very efficient. Now, I just wanted to talk about student finance. I'm going to do this fairly briefly. University fees in the UK are around £9,000 a year. Well, they are £9,000 a year. I don't know if it's, or in England, I don't know if it's different in Scotland or Wales, but yeah, £9,000 a year. Then on top of that, they have got to pay for their accommodation. Most first years are generally in university accommodation. And then they need to live as well. Student loans. You will apply for your student loan at the same time as you put your university application in, and it comes in two parts. It comes in the tuition fee part, which is, I don't know very well how this works because we haven't gone down the student loan. We did apply for student loans, and we made the decision to try and fund it ourselves as much as we can. I'll come back to that in a second. And then you have your other part of your student loan, which is your sort of accommodation and living allowance. So you apply for two different loans, basically. The tuition fee covers, the tuition loan covers all your tuition. The amount of the maximum amount of the other loan didn't look to me as though it would cover everything you needed it to cover, bearing in mind the prices of accommodation and everything. I'm not going to give figures because I can't remember them exactly. What a lot of people don't realise, and something that annoyed the life out of me, was the fact that the student loans, that you are charged interest on your student loan from the date you borrow the money, not from the date you leave university and have any chance at all of paying it back, from the date you borrowed the money. So you draw university loans down at the beginning of term, obviously, which is mid-September. I think they pay that they drip feed them through the year, so for 3 terms, I'm pretty sure. However, we made the decision not to. The most sensible financial way is, I don't think we'll be able to fund the whole university ourselves, although it would be nice if we could. But if you're going to fund some of it, it's better in terms of the amount of interest they'll pay to fund the beginning rather than the end, if you see what I mean. Because if you borrow for this year, he's got another 4 years to go. It'll be racking up interest for 4 years. So I'd rather, if we need to borrow student loans, do it in the last year. If that makes, I hope that makes sense. It all sounds a bit rambly, but that's our thinking anyway. Around that. But the whole process, again, well, I had to phone them to tell them we weren't going to draw it down. It was all very efficient and it can all be done online, but they are really, really helpful on the phone as well, because I did grill the guy a bit on interest rates and dates and times and finance. Generally, I did give him a bit of a grilling, and he knew all the answers and was really helpful. So it is worth phoning them up if you've got some queries on it. I found them to be really helpful. Finally, I feel like I've talked a lot in this video. I was hoping I was going to keep it short and sweet, but I don't think I have. But the practicalities of going to university, what they need to take with them. Will is in semi-catered accommodation, which means that we pay an amount for his accommodation every week. And of that amount, they are given £25 on a card, which is filled up every week, to use in the student, I want to say refectory, but I don't think they have refectories anymore. The student cafes and food outlets on campus. 25 quid doesn't go very far at Bath, it seems. I don't know if it's different at other universities, but they do have, where Will's living, they've got a shared kitchen between 10 rooms. He's got his own ensuite bedroom. It's lovely, really, really nice student accommodation. And so he's mostly cooking for himself, so we had to kit him out with kitchen equipment, bedding. They did provide a duvet and pillows, but we had to provide the bedding, all that sort of thing. So it's good to start thinking about that well in advance and shop around for cheap pans and knives and forks and cups and all that sort of thing, and do a big shop with them beforehand. They've got lots of food in, so they don't need to go and find a supermarket in their first few days, so they've got plenty to be going on with. There was a really helpful thing. It's always worth looking on the university website. On the Bath University website, they had a really helpful section on what to bring with you when you move into university accommodation, and it had suggestions of things which I completely would never have thought of. Pins to pin into the notice board in your room, and so I gave some so I got some drawing pins. I would never have thought of that, and it's just such a useful thing to have. He was able to put his photos and stuff up on his notice board when we got there, which I think was quite nice. It's a nice thing to be able to do and made it feel more homely instantly. Right, I think that I'm going to leave it there. I've talked for 23 minutes, but I'm hopefully going to edit it down a bit. I've rambled off in various directions at some point, so I hope that was interesting or useful. I would quite like to have seen a video like this at the beginning of the process with Will, because I kind of felt like I was going into it a bit in the dark. So if you found this from looking for videos on this subject rather than following my channel already, I hope it's been useful and helpful. I hope it's been useful and helpful for anyone who's watched, to be honest. But yeah, if you've got any questions, please leave them in the comments. I will be answering all comments. And yeah, that's it for today, guys. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye bye.